Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. My guest today is Melissa Monte. She is a storyteller coach, and I was so impressed by her story and what she does in this life, how successful she has become way after all of the trials and errors that we all go through life. And that I just thought this was such a powerful story for you guys to hear about. So let's welcome her in. Welcome, Melissa. I'm so happy to have you here at Healing Through You today.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
I was so touched by your story when we met, and we were talking about how you went from all of this negative talk, negative self-talk, and different things that we go through our lives, believing in that self-talk, and how you completely transmuted your life, your what you do, and now you're helping others, empowering others through your story. And I love that you're a story coach, that you tell stories to help others learn from that, because I feel that the stories are what we remember, right? We remember the whole story, and then we are able to get that message that we're giving.
Yeah, I when I look at my life, I spent a lot of years in more of a victim consciousness. I had a lot of things happen to me that were very easy to say, well, I didn't ask for this. I didn't call this in. I had no control over this. And over time, I disappeared in pieces. Just little by little, I vanished from my own life until the day I found myself sitting in a jail cell wearing torn scrubs and pre-worn panties, obsessing over how to purge prison food. And that escalated quickly. But I think that's what happens when you spend years disconnecting from your own body. And it started when I was 15. I was assaulted after blacking out at a party. I told myself I was fine. I even laughed it off. I became a high achiever. I wanted to be the one that everybody liked. And I think I got really good at performing strength, but it was also the moment that I stopped really trusting my body. So I became almost like a walking shell with a smile. And when you disconnect from yourself that early, you start collecting survival strategies. So alcohol, pills, bulimia, partying. And it was all dressed up in being the fun one, not the addicted one. Nobody from the outside would have really known. But ultimately, I was training myself not to feel, numbing hunger, ignoring the ache. I'd just keep going. And so I was staying likable, but I was also staying small. And so years later, I ended up meeting a guy named Mike. We'll call him Mike. I've changed his name slightly, but he was charming and generous, and he said all of the right things. And I really felt like somebody finally came to sweep me out of my life and into theirs. But over time, his stories didn't quite add up. And I felt it. There was like tiny inconsistencies that my body noticed, but my mind wasn't ready to accept, because I think admitting to myself about the lies meant that the dream was dead, that this guy wasn't really here to sweep me up and the life he was promising me wasn't real. And so I had ignored a ton of red flags. Actually, I didn't even ignore them. I think I was collecting them like they were some kind of a set. But I'd pour an extra wine glass when we talked, or a hit of weed to quiet the questions. And I was numbing even harder around him, and I swallowed all the warnings. But one day we were pulled over on the way to lunch, and I thought it was a busted tail light or something like that. But then the cops pulled us out of the car. And I will never forget when that one police officer opened the trunk, his eyes wide, and there were dozens of lock boxes from homes that were for sale and cases of stolen jewelry, millions of dollars worth of stolen jewelry over time, actually. And so we were both arrested, and it turned out that his jewelry business was actually robbing houses and selling what he stole on eBay. And he had a very sophisticated way of doing this so that nobody ever even reported suspicious activity until his meth addiction got so bad and he was inviting his meth dealer to come and take the TVs. So it was a slow unraveling, but I ended up in a jail cell and I was facing the wreckage of my life. But the crazy part was is I wasn't even thinking about the charges or court or the consequences. I remember being in that cell and my eating disorder was so severe that I could not stop obsessing over how to find privacy to purge the jail food. And so I didn't just lose touch. I think I became fluent in self-betrayal. And so in that moment, I stepped outside of myself and it was like watching a movie of somebody else's life, except it was mine. And I remember just wanting to wake up, like maybe it was all a nightmare. But I had no priorities and no direction, just this kind of blur of survival. But the truth came in pieces after a lot of self work. It was not all at once. And I think I learned a lot over the next 10 years. But what I found was that every gut feeling that I ignored, every red flag that I rationalized, every time I abandoned myself to feel wanted or chosen, I was creating from the inside out without really knowing my own power. And so over time, with a lot of work, a lot of different healing modalities, like I said, it was a little by little regaining of who I was. And I think I spent a lot of that time in that I need to find myself. But what I know now is that I don't think we're ever really finding ourselves. We're realizing that we're creating ourselves minute by minute. And even when we think we're not, we're still creating. But if we're not bringing in our conscious awareness to do so, we're creating by our default, by our programming, by all of the beliefs that we picked up along the way and have left unchecked. And so now I know that every thought is creating ripples through my reality and every belief is shaping what shows up for me. And so I can't be complacent anymore. I won't be complacent anymore because the stakes are just too high.
Wow, you unpacked so much right there. The first thing that was really raw for me to hear was that you were 15 when you first started pretending or creating this shell to be liked. And I was a teacher for 15 years, and so I work with children in a lot of very difficult and challenging neighborhoods. So, and they were only up to eighth grade, but still that was like 12, 13, 14. And yeah, that is the age when you don't have the tools or the support around you to really know how to deal with these things. That's when we begin to create this persona just so we can survive. Um, and then you started talking about like how that went into the next relationship that was, completely sabotaging yourself and your chances. And you said something very key here that stood out, which was like, I didn't want to believe that there was something missing, where I was getting all of these thoughts because then the dream would be gone. And I feel that so many of us, especially women, have that type of thought or idea or belief that if I believe in what my body's feeling, in what we're all the signs that we're receiving, then it's gone. And then what else is there? Did you feel that part as well? Like, okay, like what else would be there if I listened to this? And then where would you go from there?
Yeah, I think we do that all the time where we lie to ourselves because it keeps us in the familiar. And most often we don't make a change until the discomfort of that change is less than the discomfort that we're in. But the problem is that we normalize and we adapt, especially when that disruption happens when we're younger. We always say that kids are so resilient, but I think the truth is that kids are almost constantly in an alpha state. It decreases a little as we're older, but they will normalize anything. And so they might seem like they're powering through something, but those internal beliefs were created, and those internal beliefs are creating at the same time. And so what we accept that we deserve, about our beliefs about our worthiness, beliefs about ourself, they all plant seeds. And so, whereas I thought, I'm just not going to look at this, I'm just going to continue on with my life, I was, I had a lot of beliefs that were left unchecked, that were just blossoming open in all of these little ways. And so that, I think, is the hardest part, is that we think, when we think we're ignoring it, we're just letting those beliefs do the creation instead of figuring out how to connect to our higher mind and our true potential.
Yeah, you mentioned that it takes what, like 7,000 times to repeat a new belief in order to reprogram your subconscious. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's 7 to 9,000 times. And that sounds like a lot, but the
Yeah,
truth is every single day, our beliefs are, or the thoughts in our head are about 80% identical to the day before, which means that we're constantly repeating things over and over again. So even if we repeated things a couple times a day, we can create a full belief within just a few months. But the truth is, we are cyclical creatures. We're coming back to that. Have you ever gotten in an argument with somebody and you just keep replaying what you should have said, what they said, the meaning, and all you're doing is drilling in this meaning and making yourself miserable?
for
I,
sure. It's
for
like,
some
I
reason,
should have said that, and I could have said it. Why
yeah.
didn't I?
I
Yes.
hate conflicts with friends or loved ones. And so when that
Oh,
happens to me, it's like I am obsessed for weeks. And so it's within just a couple of days, you can end up creating a full blown belief because of how overactive our minds are and how much they'll repeat it, which is terrifying on one hand, but also pretty exhilarating on the other, because there's so much opportunity to create if we bring in a little more intention. But most people don't really understand how these neural pathways work. And so we're leaving it to chance, and we're leaving it to society and our inherited beliefs and our own mind spirals. And so thoughts are really just habits. And so if you have a thought repeating over and over in your mind, most people will take this as fact. They've heard it so many times. They've heard it way more than 9,000 times. And so now it's just a fact, and they create their whole lives around it, whether they realize it or not. But if we can expand that 20% of new thoughts and actually create little rituals for ourselves, who do I want to be? What are my biggest goals? Who do I need to become to get there? What do I need to believe in order to become that kind of person? Then there's room to rewrite those scripts that are unconsciously driving our lives.
yeah. And what I find fascinating about this is that you're really putting it out there, like straight out. It takes about this many times for you to rewire your mind, because when it comes to doing the inner work, a lot of us are like, okay, say this affirmation, and you'll say the affirmation whatever amount, maybe 100 times a day, and then you maybe do it for 3 days before you start to not do it again, or and then maybe you'll do it for a week because now it becomes too much, and I'm not seeing a change. But you putting it out there saying, hey, it's like 7 to 9,000 times before you're actually rewiring it. Then it gives us more of a goal of okay, I'm doing it. And if I only did it 100 times today, then I still have like 6,900 left for the minimum. So then we know why it's not working. And then that can help us continue doing the work instead of just giving up and say, oh, that didn't work for me.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed is if you had just told me in the beginning, okay, yeah, now you need a new thought 7 to 9,000 times, it's really difficult to keep that motivation with something that's repetitive when you don't fully trust what's on the other end. What I've found is a lot easier is taking actions that will naturally reinforce those beliefs. And so now, well, I used to, if I had a new thing that I wanted to do, had a little idea, I'd sit on it for years, maybe not really take any action on it, maybe think about it a little bit more. And we think we're just putting off an idea. But what we are actually doing every time we don't take action on the seeds of our desire is we're proving to ourselves that we are not the kind of person that takes action. And so what that does is at the end of the day, yeah, say you're trying to leave your 9 to 5 and you really want to create your own business, your own coaching business, a podcast, something like that. At the end of it, every day, you're like, that's another day I didn't do it. I'll do it tomorrow. Maybe I'll do it Saturday. And then that goes by and you didn't do it. You're having all of these thoughts reinforcing the belief that you really can't do this. But what happens is when you have an idea and you're like, I am actually recognizing I have no idea if this is possible. I don't even know how I'm going to get through all this. I do know my next step though. Maybe it's going to research which platforms I'm going to do this on. Maybe I'm going to try to figure out my topic. And you just start doing the work, then you don't really have time to have all of those negative thoughts. You're doing the work, you're seeing the fruits of your labor, and you're naturally creating new thoughts because of the evidence that you're building to support this new version of you. And so action is so much faster than just sitting there in repetition, hoping that your life is going to unfold in the way that you want it to. Sure, yeah, maybe you need a lot of affirmations in the beginning, or you can just start building, even if you recognize that doubt, and build a new kind of evidence that you hadn't yet created.
I love that. Yeah, action does work so much faster than just the affirmations. And I love that you brought that up as well, because yes, a lot of us are like, okay, I'll just say the affirmations and something will happen. But we are the ones who actually need to take action, and more action than just saying an affirmation in order for something to happen. So I love that. What would you tell someone who is not sure, like they know they don't want to be in the 9 to 5? They know there's something else that's there for them, but they have no idea because the programming is all of this of like, you have nothing to say, or who would listen to you, or you have nothing to share, or you're not good enough, or any of those things, or the market is saturated, or anything, any of those, naysaying words that we tell ourselves.
Firstly, I think it's really freeing to know that our desires are not some sort of divine cosmic trap teaching us to resist temptation. I think there's divine design to everything, and those desires are there for a reason. And so when you have a desire, you can picture yourself in a new kind of life. Trust that that's there for a reason, even if your mind is trying to talk you out of it. So that alone just gave me permission to kind of step into something new. But I also had that trouble because I hadn't done something new, and we're programmed from when we're children to kind of follow the step that somebody else lays out for us, which is on purpose. The Rockefellers wanted a nation of workers instead of a nation of creators. And so, or a nation of thinkers. And so we have to we have to kind of be our own discovery engine. One thing that was really helpful to me is I'd finally gotten fed up with chasing all the wrong things. I had been listening to podcasts like Smart Passive Income and Entrepreneur on Fire for years. And I was like, I could do an Amazon store. I could do a travel blog. I could do this. And I kept starting things and losing steam really quickly because it wasn't really the core of how I was meant to serve. I was just chasing opportunities. And so I finally was like, maybe I should do these activities in the back of these purpose finding books instead of just assuming that I changed because I consumed it. And so I started to write down things like, what am I endlessly curious about? What does my Audible and Kindle account say about me? What are the conversations that light me up the most? And sort of seeing where my desires were leading me to. And then I took it further and even wrote down all the jobs I had, wrote down where I felt I excelled, which parts I really liked, which parts I really didn't. And so I was investigating how I was already showing up in my life, how I was already serving, what people saw in me. I did another activity that was quite vulnerable and took me 2 years to actually commit to. But I wrote a letter to 11 of my friends from different areas, some former coworkers, some old roommates, some like my mom. And I said, hey, I am taking this entrepreneur course. It's challenging me to ask people what they see in me. If I had one superpower, what would you say? And it felt easier for me to blame the course rather than me just saying, what's my superpower? I felt cheesy, which is why it took so long. And I got these reflections back about myself, some things that I knew, and so it reinforced my self-belief, but then a bunch of other things that I didn't. And I found there was a lot of common threads. I didn't realize that so many people saw that I was able to take complex topics and explain it in a way that people could understand. One person reminded me of a story from a party where we were talking about something in marketing and I needed to explain it three different ways for three different types of minds. And I did that so naturally that I devalued my own skill. And we do that quite often because remember, we normalize everything. And so every single person has things that they see in themselves in their story that they are currently devaluing, even now. And I feel like I have a lot of confidence because it's something that I've been working on quite a bit. But I'll still hear things and I'm like, oh, thank you for sharing that about me. That really reflected back something that I need to strengthen. And so these are a lot of different ways to just start seeing yourself in a new way. But then also trust that when you take action, when you're actually doing instead of ignoring, the universe meets you back. But we do have to show that we're ready, show that we're following these threads, because so often something will come right to us. But if we're used to saying no to ourselves, we won't even see that opportunity. But when you start grasping onto the opportunities that come, you'll realize that there were more to begin with than you were recognizing and acknowledging. And when you meet it with action, it's like the next step will reveal itself. So we don't need to have the whole plan, which is what a lot of us want because we're all control freaks in one way or another.
Mhm.
Just know the next thing and trust that the following step will reveal itself.
I love that. There was something you said right before this, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so good. And now I have no idea what it was. Like, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it. Like what did I want to ask about this? Oh, what were you saying? But oh, you were talking about how we devalue ourselves because we just normalize everything. And I find that to be so true because, and that's one of the things that I also teach people is like, you already have everything. It's just that it's so normal to you that you think everybody has it or everybody can do it. And, so we feel that it's not a big deal. I mean, I can breathe, you can breathe, right? It's like that type of feeling. But the writing of the letters to find out about the reflection of like, hey, what did you see in me? When you started talking about it, I felt my energy beginning to constrict because I'm like, oh yeah, I could never do that. I could never ask people about what I can do. Like, and I have heard this before, like from other coaches and different books and different, places. And I'm like, I've heard this before. And I've also been like, yeah, I don't think I'll do that one. So isn't that interesting
Let me ask
how we
you,
feel? Yeah.
where do you think that contraction comes from? Why does it feel so vulnerable to you?
It feels like it's like why am I asking from others? It's kind of like praise me. Like, it feels like I'm asking for compliments as opposed to me giving a compliment, which we're so good at giving all the time, but not taking them. So I feel it has to do with that.
Well, one thing that I find very interesting, have you heard of the Benjamin Franklin effect?
No.
So, the Benjamin Franklin effect, there's this story about how Benjamin Franklin knew that when somebody does you a favor, they actually bond with you in a new way. They like you more. And so he
Ah,
had an adversary that just didn't like him. And he ended up asking to borrow a book. And the guy loaned him the book, and it healed the relationship. So I think about this quite often because so many of us, I have the hardest time asking for help, which is why I sat on that exercise for 2 full years. But again, it was one of those, I'm fed up and I'm willing to do something differently now because what I doing it my way isn't working, and these experts keep recommending this one path. There must be something in it for me. And
mhm.
so, what I essentially did is I allowed people to be a part of my path. And when you bring people in that way and they see that you have this desire, not only do you give them permission to show up in their lives in a new way, but then they're also a little more invested in your success. And so, those people that wrote those letters to me, I don't think it's a coincidence that even as my friendships have ebbed and flowed, every single one of those 11 people I'm close to. And three of them I got closer to after I did that exercise. And some of them are people I don't talk to all the time, even every year. But when I do, they're always asking how my business is going. They saw me launch Mind Love after that. They've seen what I've done since then. And they were part of the seeds of the beginning. And so you give people a gift when you let them in and allow them to help you as well.
I love that. Yeah, but you're turning it around. Like, okay, it's not about me. It's about the gift you give them, and then from there you benefit so much. And I also love that you're sharing how close you became with these people. So, like, wow, like what a way of removing that fear, right?
And you can even say, and this is what made me feel better about it, was like, I wrote some of them slightly differently depending on the relationship, but I was like, I am embarrassed to do this. This is so hard for me, but I was asked to do this 2 years ago, and now I'm just at the point, let me give it a go. And so when you show up like that, people aren't thinking, oh, there's Valeria again, trying to figure out how to uh, get compliments from me. It would be very much received differently if you were showing up in your life with all this ego and it's like, can you tell me what you like about me? But even my husband and I do that. It's like, I'll just start listing things. You know what I like about you? And I'll just start listing things. And then I'll go, now do me. And we kind of just go back and forth because we understand how our minds work and we're on the same team. So, of course, we're willing to boost one another. But you can give people insight into how this actually works, how, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. So I think there's things that other people see in me that I've been rejecting in myself. Like there's many ways to frame this based on individual personalities and what you feel comfortable with. But I also encourage people to step into that discomfort because if you're trying to create a life that's different from what you have now, the entire process is going to be filled with discomfort. And so it's worth getting used to in a smaller way.
That's for sure. I also love how you said that you do this with your husband, and then you're like, I do this, and I'm like, now do me. Like, wow, that's great. Because I've also, from personal experience, like have done things like that with my husband, but then I don't do the now do me thing, right? And I'm like, oh, hey, that's a little step further, a little step closer to bringing even more of a change. So I love
And we have
that.
a playful relationship about it. Like sometimes I'll just sit down with my tea and I'm like, I need a pep talk. Will you tell me what you like about me? And he's happy to show up. And if your partner is being like, oh God, no, then you might want to reevaluate more than just the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, amazing. Okay. I wanted you to expand a little bit more on the rewiring the subconscious. How would someone go about it? I mean, I know you already talked about like affirmations and changing what you're saying to yourself and taking action. But what about someone who really is down in a victim mode where they just feel they don't even know what it is that they want? They just know that the rut they're in is just like, I just know this is not it. But they have no, or they can't think of a dream, or they're just so blocked by all of the negativity of their circumstances that they can't expand. So, how would a person like that take action? Like, what kind of action could they take to begin to find themselves and find what it is that that they like? What are their dreams?
I highly recommend starting small. Like I mentioned, my climb out of my dark night of the soul, dark years of the soul, it was not a fast thing. And I actually did little things that I could. So it started with when I was done with rock bottom, I moved to LA. I was just like, I gotta get out of here because being in the environment where all this happened is just too toxic for me. It was painful to be there and to be reminded of everything. And I also needed to get away from my abuser who was not in jail. And so I moved to LA to get away from him. And I found a yoga studio that I really liked. And so then I was just trying to focus on myself a little bit. What are the things that lit me up? I really had no idea what I wanted to do with my future. I did ask myself the question because I was grateful. I was lucky that I did always believe I was going to be successful. I didn't really have to fight against childhood beliefs of I'm not going to be anything, I'm not smart. It was quite the opposite, which was partly what made this rock bottom so difficult because it's a big contrast to how I saw my life going. And so I knew I was meant for some sort of success. And I needed to figure out how I could do that with no one else's permission, which sort of funneled me into the entrepreneur world. How was I going to explain all that on 2 lines of a job application? Felt impossible. And so ultimately, when I look back, I see that it was my sort of slingshot into entrepreneurship because all the other doors felt closed. But that's all I knew. So I spent time in digital marketing forums. I was going to yoga. I was trying to surround myself with different types of people. I was still doing a lot of drugs at night, party drugs, numbing with alcohol, still heavily bulimic, but I was doing the things that I could. So things didn't change around all at once, but I made some new friends that had a healthier mindset in yoga. There was an opportunity for yoga teacher training. I followed that. I still didn't really know what I was doing with digital marketing. I won a contest online, won tickets to a conference, and then I won the contest at the end called the Wicked Smart competition that set up my freelance career for the next 2 years. I only ever knew the very next step. And sometimes I didn't even know that. I was just like, okay, what else can I learn today? What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say? And I just showed up in my life in this way when I could. Like I said, I still had a lot of toxicity going on. And so slowly but surely, I was creating a new version of me that was no longer comfortable with other decisions. It took me another like 9 years to stop doing cocaine at parties or to stop. It took me another 14 years to realize I don't think I even want to drink anymore. And so you build to this, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't rapid changes. When I look back, I can see it was so slow, but even something as enlivening as a new friendship showed me I was creating evidence for my own ability to change. Now it's one of the things that I trust in myself the most. If I want to make a big change, I know exactly how to do it. I brainwash myself. I'll buy, like when I was giving up drinking, I bought like 9 books in my Audible and only listened to content about giving up drinking. I tuned into some like AA meetings online, although it just didn't feel really like my personality type. I bought a bunch of the mocktail things. And so I took the actions that I knew and worked with the emotion that arose. And so I think another big part of that is with almost every big change, I have a dark night of the soul. Like even now, when I launch a new program, I know that I'm going to have about a 24 to 48 hour period, no matter how far I am into it, right before it launches, that I'm like laying on the ground wondering, who am I to do this? Feeling this huge weight on my chest, like I'd made a huge mistake. But I expect that now. And so instead of saying, oh, this must be here for a reason, I did all the wrong things, I say, oh, I must be growing past my current level of comfort. So let me just sit with this feeling. Let me ask myself some questions about it. What is the feeling without the meaning I'm assigning to it? Can I just sit with it? Can it just be discomfort? Is it even as uncomfortable as I think it is? What is it really? What does it feel like? What are the sensations? Oh, it feels a little bit tight. Can I breathe into it? And I just dissipate it. And so we are meaning making machines. That can be detrimental if we don't bring the conscious awareness to creating the meaning. But once you actually know, oh, this big thing is happening, what meaning am I creating from it? Then you also see there's an opportunity to rewrite it before it gets too deep.
I love that. How do you really rewrite it?
I'll give you an example from recently. So last year, I had a miscarriage at 7 weeks, and then I got pregnant immediately after, about 2 weeks later. And I had another miscarriage at 3 months. And it was very difficult for me. Actually, this miscarriage happened while my husband was going through a medical emergency and we were being evacuated for fires. And I was just like, I thought all the big things in my life were done. Like, what is happening? Really feeling like the world is against me, like it's trying to stop me from something. And so I'm going through all these levels of grief and survival. But I was also very aware. I was like, okay, I just had a second miscarriage. I see a really high chance of creating some sort of unconscious beliefs about what my body is capable of or willing to do. If I want to have a body or if I want to have a baby in the future, I need to make sure that my beliefs aren't also working against me. And so I just had this knowing. And with that knowing, I was able to spot more easily when these thoughts would come up, trying to convince me, like, maybe this just isn't meant to be for you. And so I I would just again sit with those feelings and I would try to remove the meaning and I would just sit with the sensations and usually they'd dissipate. That alone helped me sort of rewire my relationship to the grief. And it ultimately helped me see that it doesn't have as much power as I think it does. It still hurt. There was still a lot to feel. I'm not recommending that anybody overrides their grief. That will stay in your body if you don't allow yourself to feel it. And so I allowed myself to cry. I did a little ritual releasing the baby. I named that baby and I moved through my grief. So there's an opportunity for this with anything. And a lot of the times it just begins with a little self inquiry. You might not know the beliefs that are running your life, but you might be able to spot the patterns now that you know that that's how they show up for you. You might be able to sit in silence and ask a question and trust that the answer is going to arise. And so often we want somebody else to tell us our issues, but we know more than we give ourselves credit for. And that relationship with ourselves, understanding how to hear our own knowing, it's like learning a language. And so if you're like, well, I don't know how to do this, or yeah, I have thoughts all the time, but it's this, this, and this, there's this process of purification where you have to sit in enough silence to discern between your programming and that the truth. And a sign that you're on the right track is your programming can be anything. It can be all over the place. It can be good and it can be bad. But your truth that you're trying to tune into is always based in love. And so if any of these ideas that are coming up is about what you can't do, what you're not worth, who you can't be, what is not possible, it's your programming. But if it's just a little desire, like, wouldn't that be cool? What would that look like for you? Maybe even an image of what you see, a potential version of your future before your mind talks you out of it. That's when you know you're starting to hear yourself more. And the more you come back to that, the more fluent you will be in your own heart speak, and you'll be able to hear it a lot more. And so again, it starts small, prioritize silence, and then take action on what you hear so that you're basically giving back feedback. Okay, I heard you and I'm willing to do it. And the more that you meet it back with action, the more guidance you're going to get.
I love that. I love that part of being able to discern what is coming from love that is really serving you and what is still the programming. Being able to see like, oh wait, that's the programming. That was a negative thing. That's negative talk. Yeah, I love that. I haven't heard it put that way in those words. I've heard about like feeling light or feeling heavy or just feeling happy or feeling sad or things like that. But looking at it from the point of like, oh, that feels like the programming because it feels like it's limiting me still, then I love that. I love that perspective of it.
Well, because if your nervous system is
Mhm.
not yet comfortable with love because that's not what you've grown up in, you will
Yes.
contract when you have a thought based in love. And so our somatic responses will show us a lot about where our comfort zone is.
Hmm.
And when you get to that state of purification, yeah, I use that quite often. All right, what am I leaning towards? Ooh, I'm contracting, I'm expanding. But even now, like I said, when I'm on that path sometimes and I'm like, okay, I just got to do the next step. I just have to post this ad for this webinar and it's like a new thing that I haven't done. I'm feeling all sorts of weight and contraction, even though that's the next thing that I'm going to do. And
Hmm.
so we do have to stretch our nervous systems a little bit and regulate it in different ways. And so, what do you want to be your baseline? You need to know what that healthy marker is before we start just repeating the patterns that have kept us small in the first place.
Amazing. Is this how you help people now to get to their own power?
Yeah, I have a process that helps people use their life story as a sort of sacred curriculum. And so I've found that most of us, if we didn't have a mom that's a healer showing us our power from the get-go, a lot of times we're just sort of flailing in our lives before we're able to look back and see those themes. And so our life up until now has a lot of seeds of how we're meant to serve, what we came here for. And so once we get the idea of what those themes are that keep showing up, we have the ability to then create the future from that. And so using your story as a sort of sacred curriculum, there's two different ways of doing this. Many people just want this to figure out what is my purpose? Why has all this happened? And you essentially heal your relationship with yourself. And then there's another subset of people who want to go further with that, who want to really create their dream life from the seeds of what's already come. And so from here, we actually figure out, who are you meant to serve? Who do you want to serve? How can you put yourself out there in a way that really makes sense? How can you hone your story to create a sort of resonance with people so that you're already moving them? Because as every good marketer, even Greek mythologist, even we've always understood story, but I think we've sort of lost the technology. But story is what moves people. And so it's important to understand how your story brought you here so you can help people really craft theirs. And so that's what I'm all about is helping people create that resonance within themselves and with those that they want to have the ripple effect in their lives.
I love that. I love the way that you describe that. I hadn't seen how you tell the story. I mean, not your story, but like other people, how you help them tell their story so that they can heal from that. Can you expand a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I have a 7-step process
Hmm.
that really helps people get to the gold and find those themes in their lives. And in my bigger programs, I actually start with the 7-step process, but then I have quite a few AI tools that'll help you get to the outcome a lot faster. But here's where everybody starts. And so the first phase is all about your algorithm. This is the story that's running your life without you knowing. So you've been living inside a loop. It's a pattern shaped by all of your past experiences, beliefs, conditioning, and you can figure this out by some prompting questions that are similar to, what were you taught about success and love or worth or identity growing up? Or what recurring experiences have shaped your beliefs about yourself? So if you had to summarize your past patterns in a single phrase, what would it be? Might be that I've always had to prove myself, or no one ever chooses me, or what are those? And so as I said, there's two types of people. There's some people that are trying to just see the threads in their life, figure out what their purpose is. And then there's the other type of person that's like, okay, maybe I've already started this coaching business or massage business. How do I really connect with the right people? And so you can do this in both ways. You can either just list out all of your beliefs about everything to try to see what the most prevalent threads are, or you can look at it through a lens. Say you want to help women going through divorce or something like that. Maybe you don't even know that much. You just know you want to help people. You can look through it at that lens and be like, okay, if I'm teaching people to about self-worth or something like that, like what is this thread that constantly shows up that only you can really explain? So that's where you start. Step 2 is the disruption. This is something that really shakes up the algorithm. So it could be a crisis or a slow unraveling. Whatever it is, the old story stops working or you begin to question it. And so some prompts for this might be, what's a moment or series of moments that made you realize something wasn't what it thought? I have this moment for me with religion, for example. I have a moment for me where I didn't feel safe all of a sudden. So if somebody had asked you, like, what just happened in that moment, how would you explain it? For me, I have a few disruptions in my life. There was the sexual assault. There was also the jail time. There's a couple of these. So again, you can see it through different lenses. And then is the awakening. So this is when the fog lifts and you start to see, there's a pattern here. I keep choosing relationships that end up in the same way, or I keep rejecting my own success by pivoting too soon, or I give up right at this point. So what was the exact moment that you saw the pattern? What assumption did you realize wasn't actually true? Or what stories from your past all of a sudden made sense in a new way? And so oftentimes this awakening, the awakening and the disruption can have happen very close together, or it can be the disruption, you're in victim mindset for years like me, and then you slowly start to see a new way of being. But then is the resistance. This is the battle between old and new. Most people live here the longest. We might know what we need to do, but it's really hard to make that change. For example, I had thoughts of giving up drinking for years before I could actually commit to it. Or maybe people want to lose weight and they try these fad diets and then they stop and then they start and stop. And then they get to a point where they're like, okay, I'm committed to making a change. I can't live in this in between for very long. And so some questions that bring this out is what fears or doubts made it hard to step into the new version of you? Or where did you hesitate or self sabotage? Or what was the biggest emotional battle that you fought during this phase? Who or what helped you keep going? After this is the choice. This is the moment that you're like, okay, transformation is not just about seeing the pattern, it's about choosing a new one. And so this is where you really say, I'm not going back. What was the exact moment you decided to change for real? What actions proved to yourself that this time was different? What did it feel like to step into this new version of you? And so I have a couple of these choice points. Moving to LA, there's also a choice point where I went through these whole stages again with starting my business, where I went back and forth chasing the wrong things. Then I was finally like, nope, I'm going to do this a new way. Let me ask these questions of people. Let me do the deep work to figure out which path is mine. So step 6 is the embodiment. This is where change meets action. You're not just thinking differently, you're living differently. So what actions, habits, or choices really solidified this new transformation? These are the seeds in how you're eventually going to serve. Oftentimes, this embodiment portion becomes maybe somebody's signature program, or the way they lead people, or maybe how they show up as a parent differently than their moms did. And then finally is the gold. And this is more like an insight. It's seeing the wisdom that you gained from all of this. So it's realizing that the story isn't just about what happened, it's about what it means. The gold for me was really tied to self-worth, what I believed I deserved without knowing it. Because the truth was, I actually thought I had high self-esteem. I thought highly of myself. I liked my personality. I thought I was pretty sometimes. And so I didn't see how deep my self-worth issues were, that I kept putting everybody else above myself. And so I got a lot of gold from this. And so when you have these 7 steps, you can really see, even just by answering some of the questions that I mentioned, you'll start to get insights into all of these different threads in your life. And like I said, we don't all have just one arc. I have many different themes of what I was meant to learn. And I think that is because I see that I am a soul that came here for deep transformation. And somebody who wants deep transformation is not served an easy life, because we learn through the struggle. And so I know that was quite a few steps there, but even just, like I said, answering some of those questions without the tools that I offer later on, you'll see yourself in a new way. You start to trust your journey, that there was a meaning, or a divinity, or something deeper behind it all, rather than just random chaos.
Yeah, you continuously go back to saying doing the deep work.
Yeah.
I had to do the deep work, and then I had figured all this out, but then I went back to the deep work to figure out the next step. Are your steps the same type of deep work that you do yourself, or did you use different things to come up with all of this in your own journey?
I mean, I am a self-help junkie. So I've
Uh-huh.
tried all of these things, and I have gotten a lot from many of the things that I tried. And I do try to integrate most of those most powerful things in any of the ways that I serve, even if it might not be in the official process, but it's something that comes out when I sense a need. And so when I say the deep work, there are 1,000 different modalities that can be called in, and sometimes something new will show up because I'm asking for a certain kind of change. And that's just how the universe works for me now. But when I think of the deep work, the first step for anyone is really realizing that everything starts internally. And so even the word deep can be a reminder of that. Go inside first rather than trying to band-aid everything from the outside. And like we talked about before, there are stages too. There was a period of time where I remember I felt as though it was scary to be alone with my thoughts. And so there was a lot of external changes happening at that time, like going to yoga, even just putting a quote that inspired me on my mirror, hanging out with different types of people. And eventually I change enough inputs that another kind of change is a little bit easier. But I think it's worth stretching your capacity to be alone with yourself and to hear where you're starting from. Because even if it's a little bit scary in there, at least you know, all right, these are the monsters that I need to defeat.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Um, when you are talking about being alone with your own thoughts and ideas, I have found personally when I first started on my journey, and also with people that I help, that that seems to be one of the hardest things for people to do. It's like I sat down, but I couldn't do it, or I started doing it, and oh, I heard my dog bark, or I got an itch, or oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, maybe I need some water, or like all of these distractions that begin to come up for us because we just need any excuse at that point so that we don't have to be with ourselves and listen. And then it's the other stage when we finally get through a couple of minutes is like, well, what am I supposed to do here in this space?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, common. And I find that I think the most difficult part is actually people's expectations around what's supposed to happen.
Hmm.
And so if you tell someone to meditate for 20 minutes, which is a kind of a long time to start with, but
Hmm.
tell someone to meditate for 20 minutes and they're 4 minutes in and it feels like suffering, they think, oh, it just doesn't work for me. But
Yes.
say you decided to r- begin running and you wanted to run a 5K and that was your goal, but you've never run before. And you start running for 4 minutes and you stop, most people wouldn't think, oh, this just isn't meant for me. Some might think this is too hard and I give up, but that's very different from this doesn't work for me.
Hmm.
You're training a skill. And the whole point of meditation or silence, there's many forms of it too, but that self inquiry, allowing thoughts to arise, it's a matter of training focus. And so the meditation that I found to be most helpful is a mantra meditation. Transcendental meditation was really helpful for me. But that mantra, I'd sit there with it, and then all of a sudden I'd realize, oh, my thoughts are over here. And then I'd come back to the mantra, and then my thoughts are over here. And sometimes that's the whole time. Most of the time, it's the whole time. It's like people are expecting to get to samadhi or nirvana within seconds, otherwise, meditation doesn't work. But that is the practice. It's a practice of focus. And so, what you're doing, even if your thoughts go off every 2 seconds, you just train yourself to come back because what you're doing is you're creating neural pathways that say, this thought doesn't need to take all of my attention to where I have to get up and grab my phone, or I don't have to get up and write my grocery list. Just let it go. Trust that it'll arise when it's needed, and you come back to the mantra. So you're training yourself that your thoughts don't have power over you. And even if that's what the entire session looks like, which for 99% of the people, 99% of the time, it is, you are creating more gray matter in your brain. You're literally changing the way your brain works. And so just trust that the brain is supposed to brain. Its whole job is around creating thoughts. It's doing the right thing. But right now, you're just practicing focus. And so that gives people a lot of freedom to realize, okay, it's not that this isn't working for me. It's that I've been reinforcing distraction for 40 years. I have
Yes.
been jumping on every thought, letting it take precedence no matter what it does to my nervous system.
Hmm.
And so you can keep going the way you are, but there's a lot of empowerment in finding a new way to interact with your brain. And so that's one way to do it. And then, like I said, the other way is self inquiry. This trains a different part of your brain, but still has a lot of benefits to it. And you'll get better and better at it. It reminds me of like, say you started dating somebody new And every single date, all you did was go straight to a movie theater. You met him at the movie theater. He already had the popcorn, sitting in the chair. The movie started. You could spend 1,000 hours with this guy, but if you've never talked to him, do you actually know him? And that's how most of us treat our relationships with ourselves. We think, I'm with me all day. I know my thoughts. I know this. You actually know your programming and your conditioning. And so treat it like that. Get to know yourself. Ask yourself questions. There's a whole relationship to be developed there.
Powerful, powerful things. Oh my gosh, we've been at it for almost an hour, and it just went so fast. This is so insightful. Is there something else that you would like to share with the audience about anything that we haven't touched on?
I think I'll just reinforce the point that I think there's this big misconception in the self development world where we get this seedling, maybe from The Secret or some law of attraction accounts online, and we realize, like, oh, I have this power to create my reality. But then we treat it like it's optional, like it's something that we can just put down when we don't feel like using it. Like, I'm going to manifest on Mondays and the rest of the week I'll just wing it. But the truth is you don't get to opt out. You do not get to opt out. Every thought is sending ripples through your reality. Every belief is shaping what shows up for you. And so the only choice you really have is whether you're creating consciously or by default, by your programming. And so you can't just put it off either, because again, even the act of putting it off creates a belief. And so when you know that, yes, it can feel daunting, but it also realizes that you have so much more opportunity than you've been giving yourself credit for. And so when I look back at my life, I used to think like, oh my gosh, I'm so unlucky. How did all of this happen to me? But now I think, look how powerful I am. If I could do all of that, create all that mess without even trying, imagine what's possible when I do it all on purpose. And so that's what I want to leave people with. Just imagine what's possible with a little more purpose.
I love that. And I love what you said about we're always creating, even if when you think you're not creating, the fact that you're not doing anything on purpose, you are creating yesterday's pattern, right, of your life. Melissa, where can people find you to get in touch with you?
My podcast is on any of your favorite platforms. It's called Mind Love. You can also find me at my website, mindlove.com, or on Instagram, mindlovemelissa, where I'm always sharing just little videos of insight to keep you inspired.
Amazing. And I'm going to put all of those handles on the notes so that if you are driving or you didn't get that, you can just go back and look at that over there. Thank you so much, Melissa, for all your insights, for your love, for what you're doing for the world and people here. It just your energy is so light and so lovely, and I just love what you're doing. So thank you for sharing that here.
Thank you so much. This has been an honor.
Thanks. Bye.